Megan Firamusa, you have 6 tickets from April 5th of 2018 for expired registration, no driver's license on demand, driving while license invalid, failure to report change of address or name, expired driver's license, and no car insurance. How do you plead to these 6 tickets? To your plea of no contest to expired registration, no driver's license on demand, driving while license invalid, failure to report change of address or name, and expired driver's license, I'll find you guilty in each of those cases. I'll assess a $50 fine for each ticket. To your plea of no contest to no car insurance, I'll find you guilty. I'll assess a $175 fine. You have credit for time served for all 6 of those tickets. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. In this episode we'll be updating the footage that we have of the crime scene, mostly aerial footage, and also clarifying a few points made in the previous episode. I think the first point I want to make is that this does look like an infant abduction. It's also called a baby replacement in terms of the nature of the crime. I heard on one particular report something that was certainly news to me and kind of quite insightful to me. There's very few abductions that are perpetrated by women, and it's really for that reason that I thought in this case a male was likely involved. If there was no child, a male would have very likely, if not almost certainly, been involved in this case, just because women commit murders far less frequently than men do. Not that they never do, but it's just less likely. The fact that a child was involved didn't necessarily mean that the male involvement was less, especially if there was a custody scenario going on, or a child problem issue going on, as we saw with Chris Watts and Patrick Frazee. And the fact that this did seem to be somewhat of an issue with Shane Carey certainly made me think that he was worth looking at. On one particular news station, I'm not entirely sure if it was ABC, I'm not 100% sure of the source, but they interviewed the CEO of the Texas Center for the Missing, Beth Albertson, and she said that when adult and an infant are abducted, it's sort of less than 1% of the cases. The mother would never willingly leave with one child when she had other children. So this is a very rare case, and as a result, it's I think it's confused a lot of people, and also kept a lot of people guessing. Probably also kept law enforcement guessing to some extent. But because we know now that the child survived and that the child was actually the motive, we can see clearly that it was an infant abduction, and that then changes the mechanics of the crime and the criminal. It then becomes very likely that the criminal is a woman. Then, just in terms of some of the preliminary video, we're going to just look at that a little bit and look at what is new information in that regard, and then we will return to Shane Carey and ask whether he should be off the hook at this point. Before we get to that, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Like, share, leave a comment. Let's get started. So in the previous video I mentioned that we could sort of see figures under that alcove, and that the one figure appeared to be possibly holding something. We get a better look under that alcove, and looks like someone from law enforcement wearing a cowboy hat. Probably what he's got on his lap is he's probably writing something down. Probably got a clipboard or a notebook or something, is writing something down. I suspect that the other person sitting in the chair wearing a red sweater with sort of white text on it, I suspect that that is Megan Faramuska. And we see Megan Faramuska in court, I think this was today, pleading no contest to a number of traffic violations, the fact that she was driving without insurance, her dress wasn't correct, etc. And we can see her standing, and she's wearing kind of a heavy reddish sweater, kind of with a hoodie as well, also with white text in front. In the image from the Harris County Sheriff's Office, she seems to be wearing the same hoodie. That also seems to be maybe an older image than the one where she sort of looks like deer in the headlights. It's hard to say. She may be a little bit more heavy set in the picture where she's wearing the red sweater. It's difficult to say. I did locate the Megan Humphrey thing on LinkedIn, but it just wasn't enough for me to go on. She's described here as a wedding planner. This was posted on heavy.com. Certainly the same unique name, and that she's from the Houston, Texas area. But there's no other information that's very helpful besides the name. There's no photo of her, and no other sort of obvious connections. But the fact that this is associated with a wedding planner, I think does play into the idea of someone who, if this is what Megan was doing, whatever her name is, then one can imagine that she saw a lot of weddings, and she was aware of a lot of children, and that this was probably a big deal to her. The fact that she also wanted to get her fairy tale on the road, and when that wasn't happening, she wanted to force a way for it to happen. Also cited on heavy.com, documents apparently show that that Megan was acquitted in a theft case involving her former employer. Her former attorney in that particular case said that she was accused by a manager of putting $5,000 in her purse. Apparently this incident was captured on, I think, CCTV camera, but prosecutors couldn't prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, and so she was released. So it just shows you, had that case actually gone to trial, and had she been convicted, who knows, she may have been taken off the streets, and this could have been prevented. There's also some indications that Heidi was implicated in some theft of some kind. Also the charges were dropped. I don't really want to go into that here. What we will go into is the property itself. We know for certain that it was leased to Megan, and it was leased, I think, in August 2018, around about 5 days before the Watts family murders, in fact. If you think about that home, it's a large home. It's a two-story home. Perhaps when Megan leased the home, she thought that she was going to start a family. Perhaps she thought that she was going to fall pregnant. but ultimately what happened was she faked a pregnancy. I'm certainly very curious to know whether Megan used social media as part of that fakery, but I haven't been able. She's got a very unique name. Both the one name and the other name are very unique, but there's no sign of her on social media. It's not clear whether she faked her pregnancy on social media and then scrubbed the profiles, but there certainly doesn't seem to be any obvious evidence of her on social media. I think that in its sense would be very unusual. But let's move on to some of the other crime scene footage. From this aerial angle from ABC 13, we get a better perspective on how the house layout and setting sort of works. You see there's a garage and then a gate right next to the garage, allowing for a vehicle to just fit in between the edge of the garage building and the house. We can also see a garbage disposal right next to the car, the door, possibly the kitchen door, but in any event a rear entrance right next to the car. So probably Megan thought that she could, arrive back at home without anyone seeing her. One also wonders what her plans were to do with her friend's body. It's possible that she may have thought of disposing of the body in the garden. It's kind of an overgrown garden and wasn't her own property, or possibly driving somewhere and dropping it off, dumping it somewhere. The fact that the body had been in her car or was found in her car basically 7 full days after the disappearance, almost 8. One wonders what the car smelled like and what Megan did to control that particular aspect. We can also see from an aerial shot of the garage that it was really cluttered with junk. And this brings us to the question, is Shane Carey innocent? And the answer is he might be, he probably is, but he also might not be. And what I mean by that is he may be innocent of this crime, but I'm not sure if he's an innocent person, meaning he may not have committed the crime, but he may be less honest or forthcoming than he could have been or should have been. And also he may have something to hide besides the merits of the crime itself. So in other words, the crime he may not be guilty of, and at this point it doesn't look like he is, but that doesn't mean he's innocent. He may be guilty of something else. And certainly neighbors have already cast doubt on Carey's version of events, with one saying that that they heard an argument from next door just before 2 p.m. That's on the day of the abduction. So that is huge. We don't know who the argument was with. It sounds like it was with Carey. It sounds like he was home and Heidi was home as well. But we don't know for sure who the argument was with. If it was with Carey, then the fact that he didn't mention this is very significant. But if it was let's say an argument, but an innocent argument, and then Heidi was abducted after that, then one can understand him being quite tearful and perhaps feeling guilty and reticent for other reasons besides being involved in her disappearance. There are also allegations of abuse that have been put on the Daily Mail, and some texts from Heidi have been cited from March the 10th, 2019, so not very long ago. around about 8-9 months ago this year. And what happened was she sent pictures of herself with bruises and scratches, and this seemed to be some kind of incident that had something to do with her wanting to leave or something, and then something about the dog Zeus. I'm not 100% sure what that was about, but you can see under her arm there's looks like alcohol of some kind. I don't know if it's a Red Bull or something, but it looks like this happened late at night, and possibly there was some drinking or something. But the real dynamic we sort of want to look at here, the real, I think, meat and potatoes of this case is Megan Humphrey. Now, what is also weird is how Heidi thinks of her using that name, whereas she's been identified by a different name. So one sort of wonders what's going on there. Also, Heidi on Facebook isn't Heidi Broussard or Heidi Carey. She describes herself as Heidi Elizabeth. So one wonders also what's going on with that. But the operative emotion here seems to be envy. It seems that Megan saw Heidi, and she's pregnant for the second or third time, and felt that she wanted to get a child herself, and even if that was at the cost of a 24-year friendship, and not just the friendship but actually the life of the mother of the child. And that is how desperate Megan was to have her happily ever after. In the same way that we argued, why couldn't Chris Watts just get a divorce? We could sort of argue, why couldn't Megan just get married and fall pregnant? Why was it so hard? Well, maybe there was a reason. We don't know what her circumstances are. Certainly doesn't, when we say maybe there's a reason, we're not justifying the crime. We're simply saying maybe there was a reason she felt that she couldn't. Maybe she didn't have any money. Maybe she was down on her luck. Maybe men weren't interested in her, and maybe she felt that men never would be. But for whatever reason, she felt like she had to take matters into her own hands. And this faking her own pregnancy is the kind of living a lie deception that we see commonly with criminals. When you're living a lie, it's not such a big jump to living the lie of a serious crime. All murderers are liars. Not all liars are murderers, but it's a very important step before committing a murder that one starts living a lie. And so we see this very, very clearly with Megan. And so, as I say, the operative emotion here is envy, which is described as similar to jealousy. It's discontent towards someone's traits, possibly even their own, their status, their own abilities. And the difference is the envious is also not just the desire for something, but also coveting something. Not just desiring a particular something, but desiring it so much that you're willing to almost do anything for that, and also to take it if you can't have it for yourself. Just coming back to Carey for a moment, and this comes from dailymail.com. He appears not to have been liked by his neighbors. They described him as disrespectful, jealous, and insecure. And one sort of wonders, if he was all these things, wouldn't he have wondered where his fiancée was? And I think one of the reasons why maybe he didn't wonder where she was and didn't care was perhaps that their relationship wasn't very good. That could certainly explain why he perhaps felt guilty, perhaps was tearful. There's, I think, more to it than that, but I'm certainly not going to indulge in those speculations this early. The part that is certainly of concern, and again this is from the Daily Mail, is the argument that they thought they heard, the neighbors, one of them being a guy who identified himself as Alan G, and that this happened right next door just before 2 p.m. So the timing is very suspicious, and the kind of argument was described as a muffled row. And he returned from his job as a barista at 1 p.m. and apparently heard the argument just before 2 p.m. And what he said was he heard noises that sounded like an argument. Now, I've sat in on another court case where they said those sounds were of the TV being on, but again, we don't know for sure. But this certainly does make one wonder what was really going on between Carey and Heidi. So where we are now is we have some certainty that Megan was involved in the murder. There is a second woman who's been spoken to. We're not entirely sure who she is, but what's the next step is the autopsy, and for the autopsy to reveal what the method of the murder was. Since it appears to be a woman murdering another woman, one has to really wonder what the most likely scenario would have been. There was clearly not the sound of a gunshot or screaming that one could expect from some kind of stabbing or something like that, but if there was something muffled going on, it could be that she was strangled in her home. But a woman strangling another woman is a contest that can go either way. So we await certainty on that particular point. Then a final few things just to highlight. When you look at Heidi's home in Austin, there's a cluster of homes and a swimming pool. It looks kind of a lot nicer than Megan's home, and perhaps Megan just felt she was on the outs in terms of her life, and felt that having a child would sort of make her happily ever after, would make her feel whole and happy and complete as a person. And then finally, just looking at some of the crime scene images, we see what appears to be dogs, could be cadaver dogs. There's also video footage of what may have been the body loaded into an ambulance. The officers formed like a line to prevent the cameras from capturing that. And then shortly after that, a man headed to the ambulance or the fire engine carrying what looked like a baby carrier. I didn't pay too much attention when people brought up the baby registry thing, but I guess it depended on whether this Megan was the right Megan, and it turned out she was, and whether this Megan didn't have a child, and that turned out to be the case as well. And so this turned out to be a very significant thing, and it was, rightly identified by a lot of people on social media. So kudos to you guys. Thank you for listening, and I'll be continuing to update you guys on new developments in this case. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Leave a comment with information and insights that you guys have. Like, share, and I'll see you guys next time.